Hi, welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we're talking about The Authority. The Authority is, well, it's a movie that's on the way. We don't know who's directing it yet, but we do know at least one character that will probably be in it, and that is the engineer, played by the talented Maria Gabriela de Faria. It's a long name, but it's a fun name to pronounce, and we have definitely practiced that a few times. With that in mind, James Gunn recently, he made it pretty clear on threads on all of his social media that if it wasn't clear already that the protagonist of Superman is Superman and the antagonist of Superman is Lex Luthor, not the engineer. So that leaves us to believe that the character of the engineer is going to have a role, but it's not really, maybe it's not so much of a good guy or a bad guy, but maybe somewhere in the gray area, which would line up well with what the Authority has been known as, and especially in the recent run in the comics. But it does leave some room for interpretation on whether the engineer is going to have some sort of a role to play in the Authority movie that we're going to get in the chapter one of DC, the new era of DC. And well, is the engineer going to be the protagonist? Is she gonna be the hero of their story? We got to talk about that and so much more. And today to do that, we have, of course, as always, John. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I was thinking about this a lot because I try to, keep the authority like kind of in mind, I guess, because it's like we have this character that's in this movie that's coming out next year. Big movie, Superman's return to the big screen after, 10 years of not having a solo, over 10 years of not having a solo feature. And I always think about this character. You had the photos, we've talked about her before, all this other stuff. And I always think about her. Like I'm like curious about this character again because I don't know much about the Authority. I'm probably gonna read up on them before the film comes out, whenever that does. But I think about it because I'm curious with this character. I'm curious with all these characters because I'm curious about stuff I don't know about. Like I always want to find out more. That's like my thing. It's like, okay, I don't know about this, but like I'm intrigued and I wanna know this. I want to figure this out. And I remember James Gunn making a Threads post. I don't know if you'd be able to find it, but I do remember him saying way back when she was cast, they were like, "Oh, the villain of Superman back when it was Superman Legacy. Superman Legacy is the engineer played by this actress," and people were kind of rolling with that. I think it was either Deadline or Variety that specifically said villain. I do remember that, and she and so I was like, huh, that's interesting. So is she going to be like the main villain? Is she going to be a side villain? Is she going to be like what we theorized initially, that she was going to be like this Hope character that somebody posted on a comic book movie article? And so I was like curious about it. I'm like, how are they going to do this? But then it's revealed that James Gunn did say that she was okay. So it was Deadline, that she was like, no, she's not a villain. That's all he said. But then with the newest Threads post of him confirming that Lex Luthor is the villain, it's like, okay, so what are they setting up with here? Obviously, we have a ton of other heroes. We have Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, Green Lantern, the Guy Gardner version, Metamorpho, and her. So that's five other characters. And I assume they're not going to have big roles. James Gunn did reiterate that they are not going to have like big roles. I mean, just like how like tons of other characters in other Superman films didn't have big roles, and that's par for the course. Again, they're trying to build the world here. Is it a little bit much? Maybe, but again, we can't judge because we haven't. They're filming. We haven't. We were not going to get a trailer for a while, and we're not going to get any stills for probably a while, especially with how James Gunn is trying very hard to keep this under wraps. So with with the engineer as a character, with what little I know about her, I was like, what are they setting up here? Because initially, when they set up future films in kind of a poor state. We kind of got the Justice League trailer, member trailers in BVS where they grinded the movie to a halt to be like, "Hey, we're getting a Justice League movie, guys. Stay tuned." And it's like, okay, we just get 5 minutes of that and that. So I hope we're not getting that. But with building the world and building the characters that we're going to be getting soon, I was like, is she going to be the protagonist? Because that would be a very interesting way to do it. Now, I don't know much about, I know vaguely about the Authority. I haven't, again, as I said, I haven't read it yet. So I don't know if it's just an ensemble piece or they specifically like take a spotlight on one character and then we observe. So I think with casting, obviously we're gonna, with each character, we're gonna obviously it sets up something. Guy Gardner probably sets up Lanterns, Metamorph, Hawkgirl, probably I would assume maybe also sets up the Authority if we go with the theory that she's replacing Swift because they're essentially very similar characters, and Swift is kind of a nothing character. So it would make sense if Hawkgirl, you know, replaces her. And then I think, maybe Metamorpho Miss Terrific that sets up like the Terrifics or some or the modern version of
But
DC's Fantastic Four and that kind of thing.
yeah,
So
I'm but
I'm
like but where
curious with
does
that.
she land in the picture? My question becomes obviously, right? Like what's her role, especially with regards to
Yeah.
her own movie? Because yeah, in Superman, she may be in, at a certain place in her life as a character, but where does she end up by the time we get to the Authority? Because when we work fan casting the Authority, which you guys can check out on the channel, I think we did it with like at this point it's been a month. It's been um, I'm wondering like where um is she central to the team in the comics? Like how does she fit into the whole unit? Because that would be the question: is like is she
Yeah.
just another part of the team? Does she even make it to the Authority? Is she just a character that's like a one-off? Because I don't know. I mean, it's not like the cast. I mean, look, no offense to Maria Gabriela de Faría, she's a great actress. She's got a good resume and all that, and she could be one of the breakout stars of this movie. But she isn't exactly an A-list, star. So,
Right.
I mean, I wonder like, should we look into that, or maybe it gives us some insight into the longevity of the character? Like, do you think it's a
Yeah. I
possibility?
think I mean, to be fair, um, James Gunn is known in terms of ensemble movies, he's kind of known for taking like I wouldn't say lesser known talent, but talent that's like not in the forefront. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for the Suicide Squad, we got big stars like Idris Elba and Margot Robbie, but at the same time, we had, Daniela Melchior and David Dastmalchian, and Danielle Melchior was pretty much totally unknown outside of
She was a
her.
breakout. That was a breakout role for
She
her.
was
I
totally
mean,
unknown, and
she's
she
in
was
Roadhouse
like
now.
again best part of the movie. And then David Dastmalchian, he's not really known for like leading stuff,
So
so I
underrated.
think it'll
Yeah.
depend on the casting. I think she will it seems like with how much like they're putting on this character and how much we're kind of getting like built up with this character, not just in a worldly sense, but and not only in a movie sense, but I feel like we're getting something more with this character. I feel like we're getting something that's going to set up a protagonist in the Authority. Like she'll be kind of our relatable character because she's kind of weirdly the most relatable out of all of them. Um, because God knows Midnighter isn't, God knows Apollo isn't, Jenny Sparks isn't really, Hawksmoor is like beyond fucked up. So the only ones that are like kind of maybe sort of normal are Swift and Engineer, and and we don't know if even Swift is going to show up because we have this character that's more well known and essentially has the same power set, and people like way more that it's like, they're probably going to replace her with her. So I think what James Gunn is going to do, or at least whoever is going to direct the authority, they're going to kind of fall under what, James Gunn likes to do with ensemble pieces, and essentially have this smaller known character as the protagonist, but then he's going to get like A and B listers for like, Apollo and Midnighter. Like we're going to get like Jenny Sparks, we're going to get like a huge name, like cuz she's the leader of the authority, and she's maybe get like Karen Gillan is a relatively big name. I don't know if she's like star power material, but like get like super big names to, you know, um really nail these
Well,
characters. So
do you like
I,
remember some of the people you fan cast for
yeah, like
these
Luke
characters?
Evans, I think would be a good
Yeah,
big name. Matt Bomer would probably be a good big name.
that was a good.
Um,
Those are some good castings, actually. Yeah,
yeah, I think Matt Smith I
yeah.
did for the Doctor for obvious
Oh,
reasons.
yeah. I was
And
into. I was like,
yeah, as
yes,
I, continually
fits
point
the
to my poster.
perfectly. Yes.
So
Yep.
I
Oh, we're advertising furniture. Get out of
um so
there.
that could also be the case, because to really
Yeah.
bolster her, because it's like, because that's what usually what studios want. It's like, okay, you're giving us an unknown as the protagonist. Okay, you got to give us some A-listers. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll give you Michael Keaton as Batman, but you got to give us Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
Right.
Like that kind of
Or I
thing.
mean, even like Christian Bale was a relative unknown in Batman Begins, and then you put Michael Caine next to him as Alfred, and then you put Liam Neeson opposite him as Ra's al Ghul. Done. Or more recent example would be David Cornsweet, relative unknown, and then you've got Rachel Brosnahan, one of the rising stars in Hollywood, like a very
Nicholas Holt.
recognizable
I
name.
think I would say
Nicholas
Nicholas Holt is
Holt,
probably a bigger name.
absolutely bigger name. I mean, he's I would say he's he's like maybe he's sort of he's transitioning to being an A-lister.
I would
He's
say
maybe
he's
like
like
an
a
A
solid
minus,
B-lister.
solid
Like
B
like
lister,
a
yeah, B
good
plus.
B-lister.
Yeah, yeah,
He's not
yeah. That's a
Jack
good one.
Nicholson to Michael Keaton, but he is
No,
a hell of a lot
no.
bigger than David Cornsweet,
Yes.
who
Yeah.
the most we've gotten is like
It was
like
in
a
a show on
show, a
HBO.
couple horror
Yeah.
movies, and like that kind
Yep.
of thing.
Netflix, HBO,
So
stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, so I think
I mean,
I
dude,
would
the fact
really
like here,
like that a
by the
lot.
way, sorry, I just want to call attention to this picture one more time. The fact that you look at this picture and you don't even know which of these character actors is playing Superman. I mean, you and I can, but it would be hard for most people to pick out who's playing Superman in this picture. That whereas you can easily point to, oh, that's Rachel Brosnahan right there. There's Nathan Fillion in the front. I can even look at Eddie Gadegi and I'm like, oh, I've seen him in a few things, and of course Nicholas Holt sticks out. But you
Well,
wouldn't imagine.
that just shows the power of how he blends in as Clark Kent.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I view it.
I mean,
Um,
that's fair. He can go to Times Square, nobody's gonna recognize him as Superman,
yeah.
like Henry Cavill.
I mean, Henry Cavill was even more famous than him, and he didn't fucking get
Yes,
recognized. So you know.
dude. Yeah, I mean, and especially once. I mean, like I think after a couple of movies, I'm surprised he didn't get recognized. Anyway, sorry,
But
you were
yeah,
saying.
I
Yeah.
think it is like a big question of like, is James Gunn really setting up like, okay, is she gonna be like the next big thing? And I would like to see that. I mean, obviously I'm putting a lot of faith in this actress I haven't seen in anything. So she could totally flounder and suck, but considering that I feel like there is an ongoing, whatever the opposite of a curse is, just an ongoing like, just pumping them out properly. Okay, it's just a bit of an interesting dynamic how we've continually gotten Hispanic actresses who steal the show in movies where they are not the main protagonist. Because it happened in the Suicide Squad with Daniela Melchior. It happened with the Flash with Sasha Cali, and now it might happen with her. Like I think even though James Gunn had nothing to do with the Flash, I just think that's like kind of an
He had
interesting
something to do
little
with the
tidbit.
ending of the Flash.
So
Right.
I think that might be an interesting little tidbit. Like she might fucking steal the show. I mean, I think she looks fucking cool here. Like, yeah, it
Sure,
might be
sure.
like she
And
might have they might have stolen a Fremen suit from Dune Part 2, but I will say the cornrows look fucking awesome. Like, she looks
right.
fucking badass. So, I'm
Yeah.
curious with how they'll do this, but I feel like I think you would need some in terms of the authority with how, like, diverse and weird they could get, I feel like you need some sort of anchor, and I feel like when people walk into this movie, like with the authority, they're like, okay, we don't fucking know what the hell. But maybe people went to go see Superman and they're like, "Okay, I saw Superman. I know this character." And then then maybe when trailers for The Authority starts coming out, they'll see, "Oh, I know the engineer. I know that character." And then they'll maybe be more inclined to watch the movie, and then if she's the main protagonist, they'll be more inclined to relate to the movie a little bit better because 'cause they're like, "Hey, I
I
know this
mean,
character,"
yeah.
and be more inclined to accept
Right.
the weird shit that's probably gonna go on in this movie. So,
Dude, yeah, Apollo Midnighter, like that's gonna be that's yeah, there's a lot of potential to, do stuff that people have really quite never seen in certainly live action superhero cinema, at least on the big screen. Because I know you're like, oh well, in a world where the boys exist, and even what was that other Netflix show that was like really gory, and they had like a whole family of superheroes in it. I forget the name of the
Jupiter's Legacy?
Jupiter's Legacy,
That
right?
was
That
on
one.
I don't
Netflix.
have friends. I got family.
Sorry, I did that to myself. That was on me. But that was the even in a world where those shows and animated and live action shows exist, we haven't seen anything like that in like a theatrical, like $100+ million major big budget superhero movie. Not to mention, I think it wouldn't be too far fetched to make a comparison, especially if she does end up being the protagonist of that movie, that it would be similar to Black Panther showing up in Captain America: Civil War, and then he goes on to, of course, have his own film where it's not really an origin story in like this Christopher Reeve Superman sense, but it's still very much it's very much a defining movie in terms of who Black Panther, who T'Challa is as a character, and you get introduced to so many other characters who people fans of the MCU loved even today, who are now carrying that franchise forward. You could see that where it's the movie's called The Authority, but it maybe the story's focused on or around, or it's centers on the engineer. Because yeah, I mean, you think about it, even another trilogy of movies that James Gunn did with the Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a team movie, and they
Mhm.
were all team up films. But you can make the case that it was three movies that focused on the development of, I mean, they say it jokingly, but like Rocket Raccoon, or even Star Lord, where he starts out on Earth in the beginning of the first film as a young kid, and the last human he sees before he leaves Earth is his grandpa, and then the last human we see him with at the end of the trilogy is his grandpa. It's like so James Gunn kind of knows how to, like, bring these things full circle. So I mean,
Mhm.
not saying he's not going to be directing the movie, but being the person who's sort of shepherding the story overall, I'd imagine that would be a good way to go about it. That's, of course, me really making a lot of assumptions on the part of the idea that we're going to get the engineer as the leader or the heart and soul or the focus of the story of the authority, not to mention however many sequels it may or may not spawn. um but just to kind of pivot a little bit, like, do you think there will be like a singular protagonist in that movie, or
I think that
like how
would
do you even
be
think this movie's gonna play out? Like, it's weird, is because my only point of reference is the Watchmen, not because they're the same, they're different characters, different kind of circumstances, but like, or like 'cause the Suicide Squad doesn't quite fit the description. But I feel like I, like, how do you sell that movie to the average audience, like, member who isn't familiar with the authority or isn't necessarily even a big superhero movie fan? Because you need those audience members to bring in the box office dollars you need to make a movie
right.
successful.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily I mean, I'm just trying to look at, like also James Gunn's previous like movies, which are pretty much all ensemble, like his major movies are ensemble pieces. The pretty much the only one I could think of that wasn't really an ensemble was Super, but even then, Sinister or not Sinister, Slither was mainly an ensemble, and then obviously the Guardians movies and the Suicide Squad, they were all ensemble pieces, and they pretty much had a main protagonist. Like Guardians movies, Star Lord was pretty much the main protagonist, at least in
Right.
the first two, and then I would say
First
Rocket
two.
was probably in
Yes,
the third film was probably the
definitely.
main protagonist.
Which I
And then
mean,
in
that's the one thing that threw me off a little bit about that movie in the beginning, because it felt like they had sort of like sidelined the main protagonist from the last. Even Guardians and Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame seemed to be revolving around the story of Peter Quill. So it
Mhm.
felt a little off. But I see what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, because I feel like because there wasn't really a ton to do with him. He like the only thing was
That's
like
true.
he's just mopey about Gamora because she exists, but technically it's like
Yes.
the
That's
2014
rough.
version
It's rough though,
before
That's hard.
you know, but I just think
Yeah.
and then and the Suicide Squad, I would say probably Bloodsport is the main protagonist. Like, yeah,
Well,
all of them get a
yes.
time to shine. So like I just feel like with James Gunn's style, again, I know he's not directing the movie. But he is, the the CEO of DC Studios
Yeah.
or DC Films, whatever the hell it's called. And so I feel like he will kind of bring that sort of vein of like, okay, it's going to be ensemble, but we're going to still have a protagonist. And I think that that would be just a smart thing to do, especially it is kind of playing it safe because it's like it's a weirder team, not a lot of people know them. It's like technically a risk in and of itself. So let's, have this character that's been established and bring her in and through her she's kind of seeing all these characters. Obviously we're still going to get these characters and not just through her lens. And hey, I could be totally fucking wrong and they'll just do a full ensemble movie um where everyone gets time to shine. I just feel like in terms of like thinking about the audience point of view, let's have this character. We know her. Well, after this movie comes out, we know her. Let's bring her in and be the main focus. But I think it could also work as just an ensemble piece because there are so many colorful characters that everyone is gonna, like, oh, this because the doctor is a drug addict and because he has the entire universe knowledge in his head, that's all. You have a whole thing with that character, and then Jenny Sparks being the spirit of the 20th century, although now it's probably going to be the spirit of the 21st century.
Right.
So you have that, and then you have Jack Hawksmoor, which was like dude was experimented on, and then like now he's just like beyond messed up. And then you have like Engineer, and then you have Apollo and Midnighter, and then all that. So that could also feed into it. Sure, you could play it safe with the protagonist angle, and I think they would probably go with that. But at the same time, I think fully ensemble, like we're getting like a lens for all these characters, would also be good because each like I would say like every person has their favorite. Like when it comes to the Justice League,
Yeah.
not everyone is gonna say, Superman. Not everyone is gonna say Batman. A lot of people are, but you're gonna get a guy that's like, oh, I like Martian Manhunter, or I like Green Lantern.
Martian Manhunter is cool. I don't care
Uh,
what anybody says.
oh
Martian
yeah,
Manhunter is a cool
David
character.
Boyer
Yeah.
can suck it, but that's beside the point. I
Right.
think I think both have validity. Like one kind of plays it safe, one doesn't, but both have their pros and cons. I just think they will probably go with the play it safe method, especially since it's just a weirder team of people that nobody's ever heard before. So I think that's how they're going to go. But the ensemble also brings in like we get a little bit of everybody. So if you don't like a certain character, well, we won't, we're going to this character now. Or I really like this character. Oh, let's, you know, um, that's focused on her a bit more and that kind of thing. So I think, but it also doesn't play it safe because it's like, what if we hate all these characters or that kind of thing. So it could go either way. I think they'll go the protagonist route, but I can see why they wouldn't if they don't. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's fair. It's also going to be interesting to see what the story actually is, because it's one of those things where maybe the intent wouldn't be to make it a story that's based on one character, like around one character. Kind of like Suicide Squad is a good example. Watchmen is a good example, where you go into the movies, Guardians of the Galaxy as well, of course, and you could tell that while it's a team up movie, it's an ensemble cast and film and story, certain characters stick out, whether it's because the actors are doing a fantastic job, the screen time, things of that nature. It's so that does have an effect, and that is where people then can maybe walk away with the impression that, for example, the first Suicide Squad movie was Margot Robbie and Will Smith's film, even though that wasn't really, I don't think, the intent. I think they wanted to do a true ensemble piece. It seems like that was a big focus, of course, and then Jared Leto's Joker. And you could, but and even in the Watchmen, like Owlman was a big focus, Dr. Manhattan's story. So but yeah, we'll see how this one sort of adds together and comes together. I do want to quickly answer a fan question. Hunter Iggy was asking this earlier, so I just want to put it on screen for us. He asked, and I think this is a good one for you to answer. Do you think, and this is not the authority related, but we'll touch him on it. Do you think Damian Wayne will be 18 years old in Batman and Brave and the Bold? And then do you see? So I guess there's two questions there. Do you see Superboy escaping from LexCorp, like as an experiment? Which I believe we have seen versions of that. Wasn't that
Yeah.
in the Titans show? Like,
That
so
was in Young
yeah,
Justice. That
Young
was in
Justice.
the
Okay,
live action Titans as well. So we have gotten that. I don't think they're going to do that so soon because we already have a Superman that's barely been Superman. So it would be kind of weird to bring in Superboy so quickly. So I don't think they're going to do that. And even though Superboy is a great character, well, at least the post-crisis version with the leather jacket and just being cool and shit. I think have like that version of the character would be cool to see. I would like to see a Superboy, but I don't think they would do that. And most likely, especially with James Gunn having like a 10-year plan and introducing Damian Wayne, I think it would be more likely that they would introduce like Superboy as in Superman's son, John Kent, rather than
right.
the Connor Kent version. Although I like both for different reasons. So
Yeah.
they wouldn't do that for at least a couple of years time. So I don't think they're gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean
And
that's probably like
then
a chapter 2, chapter 3 sort of a
yeah,
development, because you gotta, like, you
um,
have Superman, you gotta, like, first milk this the he's the biggest superhero, of the most well-known superhero of all time. You gotta run with that first, until it's sort of like saying you're gonna introduce, what's the Ironheart is the character, like it would be like saying that rather than doing an Iron Man 3, they went in the direction of introducing an Ironheart character. And even now, I think the Ironheart show or movie that they're working on is still a ways off. And
yeah,
we got like half a dozen Iron Man appearances, including a trilogy of his own, and he's been in every Avengers movie so far. So it's like you gotta first have David Cornsweet's Superman sort of get
yeah,
his due before you get that far. I mean, you could have a whole, like, father son dynamic around it. Obviously, we are seeing some of that in Superman and Lois, but it's not something that I think people will be clamoring from, like, for day one. Like, you're right there. So,
yeah.
and then what
And
about the
then
Damian
with
Wayne question? Yeah,
Damian Wayne, I could see them making him 18 because that might be a little bit easier in terms of casting. And, like he's supposed to be this really dangerous fucking character. Like he's supposed to be like a literal living weapon. So I think I could see them aging him up. But considering how James Gunn seems to be like a guy who's like all for like comic book accuracy with maybe some embellishment here and there, I can see him being 18 for, um just for casting. And it's easier to get like maybe like a kid who's like Middle Eastern who's 18 rather than a young kid, unless they go unknown. But yeah, for casting purposes and for what the character is, I can see them doing that. But I would prefer to have him as like maybe like 13, 14, like maybe even 12. Because I just think that there's more intrigue in that, and the fact, like, with that character of Batman, if you age him up to 18, like, then the Batman would probably have to be like 45, and I don't
Well, but
think
that's
they
like Ben
want to make him
Affleck's
that old.
Batman was that age, right?
Yeah,
Like
I
they're
don't think they
meant to
want to
be,
make him
yeah,
that old though. So I think
yeah,
they want to keep him like in late 30s, early 40s.
yeah.
So I think they would, maybe at the most they would make him like 16. Like I think he would be depending on the casting of Batman, depending on the casting of Damian Wayne, I think they would make him anywhere from 12 to 16. And then as we've said before, I think they'll make Batman anywhere from like 35 to like 43, maybe even like
Hmm.
38 to 43. So again, it depends on which Batman they get, and it depends who they think is the best Damian Wayne. But I don't think they would go as far as 18, but I could see if they did. I don't think they will though. So
Yeah, that's fair.
there
I
you
mean,
go.
it's also like if you think about it, going back to um like I was watching a clip from I think Batman Forever, right? That's the Val Kilmer one
Hmm.
where we first get the introduction of Robin. He sort of is meant to be playing somebody who's like an 18-year-old. I feel like that's the impression I got the way Chris O'Donnell plays the character. Like the guy, like the kid is college in college, so like 18, 19, 20, maybe
Hmm.
early 20s. So that would be in line with something to that effect, although I'm sure they're going to cast a bit younger maybe, and of course this is a very different kind of story. But I also think like if you're going to do the Damian Wayne story, it's you kind of dilute the concept if you're gonna go in the direction. And again, we're addressing a fan question from Hunter Riggy, by the way, who asked if Damian Wayne will be 18. So if you guys are just joining, we just wanted to kind of like switch over from the Authority for a bit and talk about this. And
Hmm.
my thing would be that Damian Wayne being 18 sort of like hurts you don't get the full potential of the story of having this child that Batman did not know he had, because then if you were an 18-year old, you're not really a kid anymore, like you're sort of an adult at that point, right? So it's you sort of don't get to play that story to its full potential, and that would worry me. So I think to that, and I'm sure what's the name of, why am I forgetting the name of the director who's working
Andy
on it?
Muschietti.
Andy Muschietti. I'm sure like when he signed up, maybe, or even before he signed up, him and James Gunn have probably had a conversation like, hey, we're really gonna go with somebody younger. Like you have to make him a kid to take advantage of like that whole he's a little sob, um, who just Batman really has to sort of like rein in a little bit. If
Hmm.
you make him 18 years old, you're already sort of starting in that Robin era. It's because at that point, like you can't really take legal custody of somebody who's an adult, right? Like I'm not saying that's going to be part of the story, but I'm saying that sort of plays into that story, like how like what like this kid shows up and like now Batman is like, what do I do? Um, I mean, do you agree with that? Like, what do you think
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
I fully agree. I think the only thing I could see like the potential for 18 is that like, oh, he figures out what the League of Assassins is and maybe like runs away. Like, I'm an adult
Right.
now, I don't need to listen to you kind of thing. I'm gonna find out who my father is and like have that. But again, yeah, you lose the potential there because
Dude, you
even
could do that
though
with a 15 or 16-year-old,
yeah,
right?
you
Like
could do
if
that. Yeah,
yeah.
obviously, you could do that with a 56-year-old, but yeah, 18 I think would take away a lot of things about what makes the character of Damian Wayne interesting. Even though I don't love Damian Wayne as a character, as a Robin, he's probably my least favorite Robin out of all of them. Well, maybe Jason Todd, but that's beside the point. Damian Wayne as a character is interesting, but the age is interesting, and the fact he's essentially mini Batman, and that's what made the character like kind of work initially.
Right.
is like, okay, this kid who's exactly like me, how do I make him not like me? And that kind of thing. So, because like the whole reason why he, has Robins is because he sees himself in these kids and he doesn't want them to end up like him. So the interesting plight with Damien, I mean, down to the fucking name, we know what you were doing, man. Like when you created we know what you were fucking doing. But even then, with this character, I think like a lot of it's like, okay, he's my son, he's my actual biological son, he's mini me, he's a fucking like a little shit, and he's like, that's how I would be if I was his age and I was essentially Batman as a teenager or like a kid.
Oh, with all the raging
So
hormones, yeah, yeah, as
so,
a
like,
teenager, yeah.
so it's like you have all this stuff with this character. It's like, yeah, he sees himself in Dick Grayson and Jason Todd and Tim Drake, but the difference is they were still their own characters in a way. He's the play with Damien is like he has to figure out how the fuck do I not make this kid like me, even though he's exactly like me in every facet. So what do I do? And it kind of brings up that whole thing, and he has to meld him into someone who wants to be better, and Damien who also wants to be better, but again, he's conditioned to like do these things and think he's like how I think, yeah, it was in the comics. It wasn't in the animated movies where it was like when Talia is just like, here's your son. He's the product of rape. Have fun. Bye. And then like one of the first things Damien does is he like when they're like on patrol or something, or like when Batman is like doing something and Robin goes off and like starts fighting crime, he beheads somebody and he brings it to his father as a gift. He's like, "Hey, look what I did for you." And he's like, "What the fuck did you do?" So it's like you kind of have like that whole thing. So it's like, okay, so it's essentially Batman who murders, and how do I make him not Batman who murders? So I feel like that's just, and the fact that it's a little kid doing it, so that just brings in a whole level of fucked up. So I just think that is way more interesting than just make him like an 18-year-old. Okay, yeah. I mean, there's still room to grow. I mean, I'm not saying like
Right.
18-year-olds have the world figured out, because they don't. And if you're 18 years old and you're watching this and you think you do, you don't, and you're a fucking idiot. Anyway, moving on from that, there's still plenty to learn, even because you're still technically a teenager. So you still
That was
have
a
a
good
lot of,
PSA. That was a little good
yeah,
PSA
like
moment there, yes.
because I mean we were all teenagers once. We're like, oh,
Right.
I'm an adult now. I think I know how the world
Mhm.
works. You don't know how the
Yep,
world works.
I remember
I'm
that.
26. I still don't know how the fucking world works. So you have a lot to learn, and that is true. But I feel like making him 18, you still lose quite a bit of that development and something you would kind of need for you. At the most, at the very most, I think the oldest they would make him is 16, but even then, I think that's kind of pushing it, because he's still like, yeah, he could get a driver's license. Like, he's
Right.
still a little bit too much. So,
I mean, to me, like it's you look at the idea of, okay, again, I bring up a lot of MCU examples primarily because it's sort of what the DCU
easy
hopes to be
reference.
the MCU, has already been there, especially in terms of having these young characters be introduced who then we see evolve over time. Like a good comparison would be Ant-Man's daughter, right? Cassie, like she starts
Ew.
off as like a 12-year-old, and I mean very different character, but like as a 12-year-old in the first Ant-Man movie. And she's aged up a bit by the time we get to the first Avengers, Avengers Infinity War. And of course they recast her with Kathleen Newton for the Ant-Man Quantumania, but it's like with each of those movies that came out only I guess a couple of years apart or so, you got a character who started off as a 12, 13-year-old like little girl and went all the way. I don't even think she might have been even younger than
I think
that.
she was like
And
7, like 6 or
seven,
7 in the
like,
first
yeah,
movie.
like, so it was a really big jump. I mean, of course, there's a whole 5-year time jump, so like there was some of that going on, but still, by the time we get to Quantumania, she's like practically an adult. So you could have that story where we get the Batman, basically like what that animated movie was like, you kind of get that film and that arc, but then from there you age up the character, and then that's maybe where the character transition into the Teen Titans, or however we go about things. Um, I, I just think that's very feasible. Like, there's already obviously examples that I just pointed out that would play very well in terms of finding a parallel and analog to that. Um, Except, of course, the character of Damian Wayne is very much a lot more hardcore, and it's a story that can get a lot darker when you really think about it in live action. There's a lot more nuance to it, which I think they can really explore, something that the comics and animated movie realm don't really give you that much opportunity to. So, like, the emotional side of it, like, like how what's going on in Bruce Wayne's head, like, in terms of, like, he's my own flesh and blood, and like, what do I do now? Like, the stakes just feel a little like they're a little bit higher. He's
Yeah.
more conflicted, and of course, there's external. I'm sure it won't be just the Batman versus Damian Wayne story. There's gonna be another antagonist. So yeah, I think that, so ultimately, yes, I agree with you that we probably will have a situation where Damian Wayne will be much younger. Otherwise, it just does, you just don't play to the full potential of what that premise is. Um, but yeah, let's kind of switch back over so we can kind of wrap up with the Authority again. So
Yeah.
I did want to ask, revisiting the topic of whether the engineer is going to be in well, in the Authority, but also then be the protagonist. Do you think we're gonna? I mean, you might have mentioned this earlier, but like, do you think that we're gonna get a protagonist or antagonist in that movie, or is it more just gonna be all of that is the Authority? The team of the Authority is the protagonist and the antagonist in a way, or are we gonna get, or maybe some sort of antagonistic force, or maybe the Authority or anti-heroes? Like, what is that gonna look like? Because we were talking about will the engineer be the main protagonist, regardless of who's the main protagonist, who's gonna be the antagonist? Because that might help us inform who the protagonist is. Like, you kind of need the yin to the yang to kind of know what's what.
Yeah, I think if I were to guess with what they were going to do, they are setting up this character a lot, and I think that we are going to get more with her,
Mm-hmm.
and I think because of that she's probably going to be maybe not the main protagonist, but like a major factor in what drives people who don't know anything about the Authority to the movie. Because it's like general audiences are like, I don't know this. And sure, they're smart enough to be like, I like this. This looks interesting. This looks cool to me. I'm gonna go see it. Obviously, they don't need like a spoon feed, like, oh hey, this character, well, we're gonna give it to you again because we think you're stupid. I don't think they're. I don't mean to say it like that. If I ever came across as that, I apologize. But there is a factor of like, I don't know what this is, but I know this character, so I'm gonna like be a little bit more inclined to see it. So obviously, that's not gonna be for everyone because I still know people that like even after that Joker Foley Do trailer, it's like, oh yeah, this looks really cool, really interesting, but it's a musical, so I'm not gonna see it anyway. It's like
I don't get it.
just like
I don't
I
get
don't know.
that.
But like, so obviously you're gonna have people that are gonna be like, I don't know what
Yeah.
this is. I'm never gonna watch it. So fuck this movie. However, there's also gonna be the people that are like, I don't know anything about this movie, but I know this character from that Superman movie I saw. So that intrigues me. I think I'm gonna go see this. Or you're gonna have people that are like, I know the Authority. I'm gonna go see it anyway because I love these characters. Or you're like, I know
Right.
the Authority. I didn't like this character in this Superman movie, so but I'm gonna go see it anyway because I like the Authority. So there's a lot of different
Right.
aspects on like
Yeah.
fans and non-fans of these characters who will see. But I do think that protagonist, like being a main protagonist, would play it safe. A lot of pros and cons with that, but I do think that would be the best way to go. But I wouldn't mind seeing any interpretation, because like obviously her being in this movie, obviously they're gonna have her be in the Authority because it feels kind of ridiculous to like set up this character in this movie who's clearly connected to the Authority, and then like I don't know, fucking Lex Luthor shoots her in the head by the end of the movie. It's like, okay, then what the fuck was the point? Just like teasing, like, oh, this Authority character, like, ah ha
Right.
ha, we're
Yeah.
gonna have an
Yeah.
Authority
Mm-hmm.
movie, and we're gonna have this Authority character in the movie, and then we're gonna kill her by the end because we're just reminding you that an Authority movie is coming out with this Authority character, even though she's not going to be in it because she's dead.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
that
just
wouldn't
feel like
make any
that would
sense.
be
I
ridiculous.
mean,
So
yeah, it's also like when you look at the team, she's very much an unassuming part of the team where she's not the most physically imposing. She's probably not going to stand out as much as some of these other characters. Now, of course, the way it's drawn in the comics, like her power set, it might be played down a little bit, but really when you translate that to live action, especially with like, the nanotechnology and all that, I think, in a world where you have characters like Iron Man whose suits were all nanotech by the time he exited the MCU. The concepts are very familiar to the average audience. So in terms of what that character is, of course, going back to even the Terminator, like that was a character that very much the Terminator Judgment Day, specifically the T-1000.
mhm.
People very much have this like iconic film memory, this collective memory
Yeah.
of what this kind of a character looks like and behaves like. So I think automatically I can tell you right now those will be the comparison that people will be making, and the fact that she would have already been in a movie before would help her anchor with whatever story they're telling. Then of course, if they're going to have A-listers cast in some of those other roles, like had suggested, like Matt Smith, Matt Bomer, well, they're both Matts. Who else did you suggest? There was, did you
Karen
say
Gillan,
Karen Gillan? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Luke Evans would be
Luke
another good one.
Evans. Yeah, exactly. I mean, those actors would be fantastic. Like that's right there would make for one hell of a cast. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see whether the engineer has a bigger role to play. I mean, I made the comparison with Black Panther showing up in Civil War and then having his own movie. It's not quite the same thing because it's the authority, not the engineer of the movie. But
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that she can't be, one of the narrative focus, or she can't be the one that really stands out. Kind of like the first two Guardians movies that James Gunn directed. Star-Lord basically was his story. It was told from his perspective. Whereas the third movie was a little more, Rocket Raccoon's story. So, yeah, we'll see where this goes. I mean, I'm excited. Like, do you think we're getting this movie anytime soon? Like, given what we know about a lot of these other projects right now? Like, do you have any ideas to any
Yeah, I
any
think
hints?
so. I think we're gonna be getting some good stuff in the future, and I think the Authority is just gonna be one of them, and no matter what route they take with these characters, I'm all for it. Like I think they're gonna make some good choices. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah. I think
if
you're
I'm a little
yeah.
frozen right now.
Yeah, you're a little
My
frozen. Yeah.
that's my bad. But
Oh
as long
man,
as you can,
say
I was worried. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I hope they can still hear me. But yeah, I'm a little
No, we can
frozen right
hear
now. My
you.
webcam, I have to look nice and pretty, so it's on the highest definition
Mhm.
camera. So
Yep,
I don't
yep.
want to,
It
be
happens,
ugly
man.
for you guys. So I got to make sure. But that causes my screen to freeze sometimes. So
Yeah,
I
I know. Well,
apologize.
it's this time of day, a lot of families are on the internet, so this kind of thing tends to happen. So, yeah.
Your brother never told you never threaten a man's family?
Oh, there you are.
Our family brought my webcam back. Now
Yeah,
it's no
that's
longer frozen. Thanks, Dom
exactly. Yes.
Toretto.
Yeah, Dom Tourette, it's very powerful. Power of family. It's truly it's a thing. I'm telling
What's
you.
real is family.
And with that, I think we have come to a conclusion that the engineer will be a part of the authority, whether she is the protagonist, the antagonist, we'll find out. You guys let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, come back here tomorrow. We'll be fan casting Booster Gold. We've got, speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, we've got some interesting ideas as to
Hmm.
who might be playing Booster Gold, or like some of the surrounding cast. Like, we'll see. Well, I mean, we know who Blue Beetle is going to be played by. Of course, Sholo Maridueña is back as Blue Beetle, so that sort of takes care of itself. But there's other characters that we want to get into. And yeah, if you have any more questions, comments, like whether it's about Damian Wayne, Hunter Iggy brought up Superboy, any other questions about Superman the movie, just drop them, or thoughts, and and opinions or fan castings of your own. We love those. We'd love to get into those and see like what you guys come up with, because it's there's all kinds of ideas floating around here, and who knows, you might come up with way better ideas than and we can think of, which does happen more often than you think. So yeah, we'll be back here tomorrow. Until then, guys, go out there, watch something DC related, and come back here, talk to us all about it. We love hearing from you guys, and of course, like and subscribe. That does help us out with the algorithm. So we'll be back here tomorrow on DCU Daily.